Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Artificial DM. Today, I'll be diving into the question, what is the best mistake you've made while playing D&D? Before we get started though, I'm going to give my best story about a mistake I made while playing D&D. A couple months ago, a friend of mine decided that she was going to run a one-shot, so I made Crossbow, the Magnificent, in quotation marks. He was a gnome wild magic sorcerer, and when I built the character, I had one thing in mind that I wanted to do for sure. I wanted to be able to cast Mage Hand and fly on the Mage Hand. I'm sure you've all heard the story about a character who was able to reduce his weight, so that way he basically floated around without the need of Mage Hand, and that's kind of where I got the inspiration for building the character. I went ahead, I made this character, and I chose a couple of spells, and I had it in my mind that, oh yeah, when danger hits, we'll go ahead, cast Mage Hand, shrink ourselves down, and then fly around and shoot spells from the Mage Hand. It'll be great! Well, there's one part of Mage Hand I completely neglected as I was going over it. Mage Hand requires your action to be able to move it, which means I wasn't able to fly around and cast spells at the same time. I didn't realize this until we were playing. The previous turn, I shrunk myself down to about the size of a fairy, and then, the next turn, I cast Mage Hand, I hopped on the Mage Hand, and I couldn't move. I had to just sit there and wait a turn, and I realized then it was way too slow for what I wanted to do. However, I already built the character around this whole idea, and I ended up flying around, and it was cool for after combat, but it was terrible in combat. So word to the wise for any of you in the future who are planning on replicating that plan, great for exploration, terrible for combat. Let's go ahead and hear your story about the best mistakes you've made while playing D&D. Sorry if I butcher your name, I probably will. La Violence Absolue. Sorry for bad English, I shall try my best to tell the story. I remember long ago I played in a homebrew investigation RPG. It was much like Ace Attorney for those who know, but in a fantasy universe. In our first investigation, our group of lawyers had to prove the innocence of our client, but even after questioning all the witnesses and looking deeply at the crime scene, we had really no idea of what happened or who had committed the murders. We came to the trial with fake evidence and told everyone we had them form a private detective, just in case we were discovered, and we tried to accuse a child who witnessed the scene. I argued with the prosecutor, saying, yes, this 6-year-old girl slaughtered a dozen men, threw a bed out a window. Too long to explain, but I based my accusation on the fact that there were beds in the room at the time of the murder, but someone made them disappear, and add to the list that she flew into the vent to make my client the suspect. Do you know the best part? Even if no one at the trial really believed me, the other players were just counting on me because they had really no idea. And even if I, myself, was thinking of all of that as an astoundingly bad lie, it appears that I was actually right. The 6-year-old girl was the murderer. All the things about the bed, on the other hand, was bullcrap. During the trial, she was just so tired of our nonsense that she decided to reveal her true form, an aberrant metallic monster, and then she tried to kill us. So the trial ended on a combat, and our GM was clearly disappointed. I think it's fun whenever a player ends up pulling crap out of their ass, and then it ends up being right. This story is from David Thuranger. I really don't know if this is right or not. The first game I was playing was with about a dozen other friends. For most of us, it was our first time. Michael was our DM. We made a lot of mistakes. It was in the early 80s. I think it was AD&D we were playing. Some had more than one character, so about 20 party members. Oh jeez. Yeah. We were an actual adventuring company. We had just fought our way into the ruins of a castle and were exploring inside the keep. The wooden floor in one area of the corridor had collapsed and you could see a river flowing underneath. On the far side was a small amount of floor still left and a door. A closed door. So naturally, we tried to get across. We spent many actual hours trying to get across to that door. I think all of us had at least one bath and long hike back from the pond the river flowed into. Finally, we get about 4 of us across. That was all that would fit on the ledge. They opened the door to a blank wall. It was a fake door. In that same adventure, my best friend Jason was a wizard, and I was a fighter. A fighter in plate mail with a shield would be like AC 19 now, if I recall correctly. Jason had a thin cloak of about AC 10 and a staff, which was a glorified walking stick. I had a sword, don't remember the type. Jason fell through a trap door into a slide that sends him into a pit of spiders. There was no direct line of sight, so we couldn't cover him with missiles or magic. As Jason was my best friend, I dived into the hole, down the slide, and into the pit. Long story short, I got hit every stinking time by those spiders, and never even scratched one of them. Jason was walking right through them and getting missed every time. Jason was already out of magic and began to club the spiders to death before some of the others came to help. I am sure in some alternate reality that fighter is still getting ribbed by his compatriots about being mauled by some spiders while dueling with the air. Sometimes it just doesn't work, even when it should. That's part of where the dice rolling comes in. The 3D Lukes. Not really a mistake, but a series of bad rolls for my whole party. We were trying to take out a fleeing Gnoll, but every single attack missed and the Gnoll got away. And now we're calling him the Boy Who Lived, and anticipating that our DM could make him come back at any second for revenge. Lion Woman says, we didn't understand or misread the loading feature of crossbows. So I, using an action surge, threw a flooping crossbow as I believed I could not shoot another arrow. I killed a man by throwing a crossbow in his face. Still the best moment. The Fatal Crest says, sent a murderous lizardman barbarian into a city to hunt down a hidden hag who placed themselves in a position of high regard. In-character reason? Stir up the nest, see what shakes out, and possibly rout her out. And to see what happens. Out of character reason, let's see if this guy can spook our target a bit. This story is from Who the Fuck is Riley? Not my mistake, the mistake of the only other party member involving my character. I'm going to call him C, because that's the first letter of his name. Me and C are fighting a possessed Scarecrow. Scarecrow hits me, and it drops my level 1 wizard down to 0 hit points. C swings at the Scarecrow. Nat 1. He misses the Scarecrow and hits me. 2 death saves down. Roll my last save. He swings again, kills the Scarecrow. I'm barely saved by the same idiot that almost killed me. See, if you hear or read this, you know who you are. Kiki Blair shares, I was really young at the time and thought combat reflexes allowed me to take all of my attacks of opportunity against one opponent in one turn. It was the DM's first 3rd edition campaign, and he didn't know better either. He was a villain DM, and put me up against a custom dragon one-on-one. The fight was hopeless. He was saying that the absolute 0 temperature breath weapon ignored my cold immunity. He got cocky, and the dragon moved through my threatened area, allowing for an attack of opportunity, and I made 13 of them due to my insane dexterity. I was a high level, and I killed the dragon. It felt wrong, but I was 11, and didn't want my character to die more than I wanted to reread the feat entry. Mildred and her party went on to beat a souped up version of Tiamat who got 5 wish spells per round. I'm pretty sure I have her around in my old stuff somewhere. J. McDonald shares, playing 5th edition and expecting it to be as good as 3.5. Personally, I've only ever played 5th edition, and I've had a blast with it. Inverse Nexorus has this story. It wasn't my mistake, but my players when I was DMing. I hope this counts. The trio of big bad evil guys have a base in the center of a mountain. There are many tunnels that lead to the cavernous lair, including spiky chimney structures along the mountain that flumps use to emerge at night. The players thought that they were being clever when they got a friendly NPC who can use the spell Control Weather to rain directly over the mountain chimneys, essentially flooding the dungeon. However, what ended up happening was 2 things. First, the captured elves they promised to save all drowned. Second, the brute big bad evil guy who they know can use an ability to open dimensional rifts and portals did so in their base. The torrential geyser that spawned in the party's front living room destroyed everything. Thankfully, I am a merciful DM, and when they asked for a retcon, I gave it to them. Shandor Davies has this story. So I'm playing Rifts, the post-apocalyptic 80s kitchen sink game, where I play as a dragon hatchling named Fluffy. Now, because one player cheated, we all use a giant D20 at the table. The D20 really hates me. One day, Fluffy got hungry and wanted to go hunting for some food. Critical failure. Fluffy successfully hunted a landmine with her face. Hurt and disoriented, Fluffy wanted to try and find her way back to the rest of the group. Critical failure. Fluffy found her way to the edge of a cliff. Wait a minute! Fluffy is a dragon! She can fly! Well, given she's dazed, disoriented, and now panicking, you better roll to open your wings in time. Critical failure. Fluffy hit the dirt and was knocked out, and the rest of the party had to attempt to revive her. Somehow, this involved an impromptu dance party with some passing lizardmen blaring out the Vengaboys' greatest hits. And this is why Fluffy associates the Vengabus with pain and death. Samuel Bell says, I played a hunter in Pathfinder. I had a negative wisdom, so I couldn't use magic. I was essentially a ranger with no spells. They had a constrictor snake as an animal companion and 17 intelligence. Terribly made character, but roleplayed him like an orc from Warcraft that was pretending to be dumb. He became a meme and a legend, with his impulsive actions and one-liners that were suspiciously thought-provoking and progressive for an orc. Ivan Abrio shares this story. The Legend of Excaliknife, the ultimate multi-tool. My friend Happy, based off Gilmore, found a Swiss Army knife stuck in a table. He pulled on the knife so hard that the section of table broke off. We watched laughing for 10 minutes as he did everything to extract this knife. I rolled for perception and realized the section of table was sprouting roots, and the table it broke from now had a segment of what looked to be a branch curling to replace the corner of table that broke off. As the chunk of wood became heavier in Happy's capable hands, he felt a presence gently caressing against his mind. Instead of allowing the presence in, he immediately dropped the knife and wood block, which was slowly growing into a sapling. I decided to reach down and grab the knife and kindly asked it to release itself from the tree, which was now growing thicker. It did, and the knife slid out easily. Happy tried to snatch the knife from my hands, and when he did, it transformed into a 100-pound anvil. Again, I touched the knife, and it turned into a sword matching the one I had lost during a recent fight with a corrupted archangel. Both Happy and I ended up touching the sword. To me, it was light as a feather, but to him, it felt unwieldy and heavy as hell. As the game progressed, I would find it would take shape of the tools I needed, and if I asked it, it would allow my friends to wield it and protect them from harm, while I would try to do something else to help our party escape overwhelming odds. The shapes it took were Thanos-like gauntlets that added holy damage, unbreakable lockpick, holy hand grenade that would explode to become an area of blessed earth, a corkscrew, whetstone that when used to sharpen a blade, the blade in question would never need sharpening again, car key, jackhammer, and once it even turned into a child's doll that was the favorite plaything of Happy's reincarnated child form. This is only a small list. Other times it became weird things like an acrylic nail or a helm of dark sight, but primarily it would stay in the form of my lost sword and would grant me miracle healing to help my party members. Nicholas Adipietro. In my very first combat encounter of my very first game, I didn't know the rules that well. I wanted to use burning hands on an insect enemy, but the cramped room made it impossible to cast without hitting a teammate. So I asked the DM if I could taunt the insect into going after me, whereupon I would lead it to an open room and use the spell safely. He made me roll animal handling. First ever natural 20. I ran, but was confused when it didn't immediately follow. That's when I learned how initiative worked. It gets better. It had to run past not one, not two, but 3 party members. This accidental moment is when I was introduced to opportunity attacks. It was dead before my turn came back around. That sounds like a pretty cool way to learn those mechanics. Optical Arsenal has this story to share. We started at level 1, and I had picked a druid. This is Pathfinder though. And for flavor, I gave my character Rosewood Armor that she watered on clockwork every day, as a good tree-hugging druid would. We were in the frozen north, sheltered for the night at a small rest stop with an outer wall for protection. So, we get attacked by an orc raiding party at night. We love some free XP, and so we go on the offensive defense, climb the wall before them. Some orcs get put to sleep while trying to scale the wall, and they, well, don't climb the wall because sleeping. I succeed my roll to climb the wall. Then, I fail my roll to jump off the wall and land on my feet, face planting right on top of a sleeping orc below. Cue Rosewood Armor having built-in armor spikes because I took good care of it. Roll for damage, GM says. D6, max roll. Orc only has 6 HP. I killed an orc by slipping on a wall, landing on him, and killing him by accident. Best blunder ever, and I will remember it fondly. Rock and roll. I was my Goliath Ranger with a gorilla companion. He fired an arrow, rolled a nat 1, and hit a friendly NPC. The NPC asked how I had figured out that they were against us. My cock-up uncovered the secret big bad evil guy. Oops. I feel that was really a combination of the player messing up because of that one and the DM messing up because he let the cat out of the bag. That's funny. Double blunder. Cosmic K13 has this to share. Somehow, I burned an hour and a half arguing with 3 other people whether or not you could unarmed strike as a bonus action after an attack. It was at the 1 hour mark in which I found that an unarmed strike is a monk exclusive thing. Oops. This is from Jinx Jade. During the first session of a long-running campaign, we stormed a wizard's condo in the middle of a big city. After killing the wizard, we contacted his landlord and arranged to rent his room, since he had modified it to have access to a series of tunnels that would help us get around the city way faster. Turns out the wizard had friends who also had access to these tunnels, and they didn't take too kindly to us. It wasn't until after the first assassin came that it occurred to us that we may have made some kind of a mistake. Cyan HB has this to share. Carelessly turned on my priest deity at the prompting of a higher deity and became a demigod. Prinsu has this experience. Forgot to prep some quest for a session, so had to ad-lib something. My players end up wandering around the desert exploring for a while, during which I was rolling on random encounters tables. Well, they got to know one another in character. I roll stupid high on the table and pull a young brass dragon. Mistake number 2. I have to ask Pole to make sure my level 1 party of noobs doesn't initiate combat with the good aligned dragon, so I have him be sleeping and appear to be a statue, so maybe they will leave to go get a cart to take him back to town, by which time he will have left only footprints around, and I can have him recur later. Nope. They, a group of 3 pretty small, low-strength characters, try to pick up the horse-sized, apparently solid brass statue. He wakes up, and thankfully they are all enamored with the charming, bold, gregarious young dragon noble I hastily ad-lib him to be. The party got an on and off himbo tank buddy that day. I still have references to him in some of my campaigns. His name was Bararad Caladan Mishan Redana. His name was, and I'm totally gonna botch this, Bararad Caladan Mishan Redina Brazen Thrixus Eldajiri II. And he kept falling into sinkholes in humanoid form. Love that dude. The other contender was the hillbilly fairy kidnapping plot, but I'm not exactly sure if that fits. Master South 5 shared. Our healer decided to stay outside the enemy's base while 3 of us were captured. The other person tried to get the druid to also enter the basement. He didn't, since he wanted his wild shape back. Then this dude tries to kill one of the guards that we had distracted, but didn't use Divine Smite and didn't kill him. This led to us trying to escape, the boss and more guards trying to enter, and the player died by holding the wrong side of the door and being bashed to death because of it. My character managed to free the sorcerer and bard, but went down a couple of times. At the end, it was just my character, sorcerer, the boss, and a random enemy. He prepared to shoot if I fled, so, instead of attacking him, I decided to make a run for it. Nat 20, insta-death. Worse, I did a test roll to attack him. It would have been a 20. We could have all survived, but because of my mistake to run instead of attacking, the bard got recaptured. The druid then refused to save him then and there. This is Scattered Aesthetic's story. I'm fairly new to D&D, so it was my first mistake of what I'm sure will be many. I threw a crystal that my DM stressed was a random spell and should only be used in emergencies at a random enemy while on the ground. It contained a meteor shower, and I accidentally wiped out about half the town. Oops. Here is Dinosaur's story. First time playing, I convinced the team to harass some ice giants. Oh, that's gold. As we fled from them, one lobbed a boulder at me, so I used my dragonborn strength to grab my friend and use him as a human shield. He, unfortunately, did not survive. I am a broken man, shares. My human fighter, who was racist toward Dragonborns, almost made the Goddess of Mischief kill us because of a bad pun. And Rachel Twilight needed some context because the chain of events that lead to this sound hilarious, and I agree. My character was a retired army captain for a human and elf kingdom. We had a major war with the Dragonborns. Everything else is a long story. Just gonna leave it at this. Time travel, multiple dimensions, hitting a dead girl with my magic sword to keep her alive, a robot, and the power of possession. And my character would uncontrollably sob when near a spike trap, because my goblin wife was killed by one. And Jason Alexander Wong shares, the usual D&D crack, I guess. Mitsin Meeser shares, I forgot my half-elf draconic bloodline sorcerer's resistance to fire. He was literally knocked to 0 HP because I forgot, but it ended up resulting in an epic roleplay moment where the Leonin Paladin and the Changeling Rogue worked together to save his life and just tighten the trio's bond. This story is shared by Athreos. I have a cleric that I made for an Adventurers League group I'm part of. This one time, I played with a party comprised of melee characters and no other casters aside from my cleric, so I played him as a support. During that game, almost all the encounters were casters that hid behind heavy hitter frontlines. Possibly a quick tune our DM made since we asked for a challenging game. So the party got sniped with spells until we dealt with the front line and make our way to the casters. After the last battle, and when my DM was closing the module, I noticed something in my character's equipment. A Rod of Absorption. I could have used it to avoid my character taking so much damage during the game, but I completely forgot about having it in the first place. I asked the DM if I can have one last roleplay interaction with the party before closing the module. He gave the green light, and I described how he began looking in his back pouch for some minor potion for the party, only for him to exhale a heavy sigh and facepalm himself while holding the rod in the other hand, and between chuckles, he said, Well, this would have been more useful back there. Have to remember I have this for the next time I decide to join you all in another mage hunt, huh? And then he resumed his potion handling. After that, whenever a character from that party meets him in a game, they ask him, Do you have all you need in hand? Or a variation of that. It was so fun for him to cross paths with anyone from that party. Sadly, he's on T4 now, and there are less games I can take him to due to the lack of fun and good T4 modules. Here is Tim E's experience. When my cavalier went on a jog when the party knew there was a hit on them without his armor and polearms. When he got attacked, he also collapsed an old building on top of them both. In the end, he won, with only his shield and a dagger he kept in his boot, but it was a pretty bad decision. Rubrum Achaea shares, First time playing D&D, I was a druid mage who got caught up in the town's odd crisis with an evil plant that was spreading plague. Me, being the chaotic good child I was, decided to talk to the angry plant. The DM didn't expect this, and had to improv, and this led to me negotiating with the town about their deforesting methods. Something similar happened later, when my character decided to talk to the angry wyverns, instead of slaying them. And so, a contract was signed between the dwarves and the wyverns about their child napping issues. My character was apparently really good at politics. Here is Luxor Meister's story. So, it was back in 3.5. Me and a regular DM were asked to be players by my former friend because he wanted to learn. DM had all the books and was happy to borrow any books for prolonged periods of time, and also help teach. As I knew this was more a tutorial campaign than anything, I didn't put much thought into character creation, and made Dimbell, an ego-driven, panty-hunting gnome bard with little to no backstory. Grew up as the only boy with 3 sisters and no father. Then he ran away. That's all I had. He was good at smooth talking, music, magic, and gems. I never got to show off the last part, but I was okay with that. The campaign itself was pretty disappointing, even though I loved my character, and our small party of 2 of us, plus an NPC. But I won't go into too much detail about the campaign. One day, we are dungeon delving to chase a local cult we are after. We are in their hideout, and we come across a literal massive loot hoard. We promptly proceed to rifle through it, looking for things of interest. I come across a ruby the size of my head, and get excited. I ask to estimate the price of the gem with my skill, for exactly that. I am a gnome after all, I reason. This is part of my culture. Natural 1. I get told it is big, but it's not exactly ruby, and the quality stinks. Worthless, I mutter to myself, intending to fully commit to play out that nat 1. I chuck it behind myself carelessly, where the old DM's druid finds it, and does an unskilled check to appraise. He rolls well enough to see that the massive gem is worth loads, and just shakes his head in disbelief as he pockets it. It was a blast, and we all had a good laugh that moment, and ever since, I've loved crit fails, and always play them out. That's a great point to show how crit failing should be implemented into the game. It's part of the game already. You should go ahead and embrace it for your character, because it makes for fun interactions like this, and overall, a fun story down the road. Cassandra Fugate shares, I tried to DM for my first time with my own homebrew. It got derailed in the first 5 seconds. I traumatized 2 of my friends who were players. Good times. Here's what Snagit Paints did. Training bats to drop vials of acid on an enemy encampment. Botched the animal handling roll. Bats just dropped them on ours. Basically exactly what the Russians did when they were training dogs to go underneath the German tanks. It did not end well. This is from Caesar Vertigo Kikari. I consistently got bad rolls when we started that got better with time, so my character became a Sokka-like underdog for the party, and that's a win in my book. My girlfriend's character also got to 0 HP many times, and made people think he was a brave warrior. This is from Dolan Cherokee. First time. Didn't know what I was doing. Didn't know I was talking to the town guard. Didn't realize that I could apparently kill him with 1 hit from my Dragonborn Barbarian. Panicked and burned down the entire town. Reasonable response. We were trying to play Princes of the Apocalypse. The other kids immediately jumped with me into slaughtering the town, and then it all went downhill from there. Gold. Our last post is from Jesse Brooks. During an evil campaign, I straight up forgot who we were working for and made a deal with a devil for power, who was opposed to the demon that gave us our quest. Wound up fighting the party before teleporting away. We all had a good laugh after the session, and I got a good backup character out of it. Thank you all for sharing your stories, I really appreciate it, and hopefully you have some of your own tales to share down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. That's gonna do it for today. And until next time, hope you feel inspired.